Such things cannot possibly happen, he thought. I've ridden much too long in the bleak forest. This is only an optical illusion. Nevertheless, he gave the closest attention to the spectacle and wondered what was about to be done. He hadn't long to wait before he caught the sound of a familiar bell coming from the depths of the forest, and the next moment he heard footfalls and crackling of branches, as when many animals break through the forest. A big herd of cattle was climbing the mountain. They came through the forest in the order in which they had marched to the mountain ranches. First came the bell cow, followed by the bull, then the other cows and calves. The sheep, closely herded, followed. After them came the goats, and last were the horses and colts. The sheepdogs trotted along beside the sheep, but neither shepherd nor shepherdess attended them. The dean thought it heartrending to see the tame animals coming straight towards the wild beasts. He would have gladly blocked their way and called "Halt!" But he understood that it was not within human power to stop the march of the cattle on this night. Therefore he made no move. The domestic animals were in a state of torment over that which they had to face. If it had happened to be the bell cow's turn, she advanced with drooping head and faltering step. The goats had no desire either to play or to butt. The horses tried to bear up bravely, but their bodies were all a-quiver with fright. The most pathetic of all was the sheepdog. He kept his tail between his legs and crawled on the ground. The bell cow led the procession all the way up to the wood nymph, who stood on the boulder at the top of the mountain. The cows walked around the rock and then turned towards the forest without any of the wild beasts touching her. In the same way, all the cattle walked unmolested past the wild beasts. As the creatures filed past, the dean saw the wood nymph lower her pine torch over one and another of them. Every time this occurred, the beasts of prey broke into loud, exultant roars, particularly when it was lowered over a cow or some other large creature. The animal saw the torch turning towards it, uttered a piercing shriek as if receiving a knife thrust in the flesh, while the entire herd to which it belonged bellowed their lamentations. Then the dean began to comprehend the meaning of what he saw. Surely he had heard the animals in Hlsnglnd assemble on Black Ridge every New Year's Eve, that the wood nymph might mark out which among the tame beasts would that year be prey for the wild beasts. The dean pitied the poor creatures that were at the mercy of savage beasts, when in reality they should have no master but man. The leading herd had only just left when another bell tinkled, and the cattle from another farm trampled to the mountain top. These came in the same order as the first, and marched past the wood nymph, who stood there, stern and solemn, indicating animal after animal for death. Herd upon herd followed, without breaking in the line of procession. Some were so small that they included only one cow and a few sheep. Others consisted of only a pair of goats. It was apparent that these were from very humble homes, but they too were compelled to pass in review. The dean thought of the Hlsnglnd farmers who had so much love for their beasts. Did they but know of it, surely they would not allow a repetition of this, he thought. They would risk their own lives rather than let their cattle wander amongst bears and wolves, to be doomed by the wood nymph. The last herd to appear was the only one from the rectory farm. The dean heard the sound of the familiar bell a long way off. The horse, too, must have heard it, for he began to shake in every limb and was bathed in sweat. So it is your turn now to pass before the wood nymph to receive your sentence, the dean said to the horse. Don't be afraid. Now I know why you brought me here, and I shall not leave you. The fine cattle from the parsonage farm emerged from the forest and marched to the wood nymph and the wild beasts. Last in the line was the horse that had brought his master to the Black Ridge. The dean did not leave the saddle, but let the animal take him on to the wood nymph. He had neither knife nor gun for his defense, but he had taken out the prayer book and sat pressing it to his heart as he exposed himself to battle against evil. At first it appeared as if none had observed him. The dean's cattle filed past the wood nymph in the same order as the others had done. She did not wave the torch towards any of these, but as soon as the intelligent horse stepped forward, she made a movement to mark him for death. Instantly, the Dean held up the prayer book, and the torchlight fell across the cross on its cover. The wood nymph uttered a loud, shrill cry, and let the torch drop from her hand. Immediately, the flame was extinguished. In the sudden transition from light to darkness, the Dean saw nothing, nor did he hear anything. About him reigned the profound stillness of a wilderness in winter. Then the dark cloud parted, and through the opening stepped the full round moon to shed its light upon the ground. The Dean saw that he and the horse were alone on the summit of Black's Ridge. Not one of the many wild beasts was there. The ground had not even been trampled by the herd that had passed over it, but the Dean himself sat with his prayer book before him, while the horse under him stood trembling and foaming. By the time the Dean reached home, he no longer knew whether or not it had been a dream, a vision, or reality. This that he had seen, but he had took it as a warning to him to remember the poor creatures who were at the mercy of wild beasts. He preached so powerfully to the Del Sabo peasants that in his day all the wolves and bears were exterminated from that section of the country, although they may have returned since his time. Here Bernard ended his story. He received praise from all sides, and it seemed to be a foregone conclusion that he would get the prize. The majority thought it almost a pity that Clement had to compete with him. But Clement, undaunted, began. One day, while I was living in Skansen, just outside Stockholm, and longing for home, then he told about the tiny midget he had ransomed so that he would not have to be confined in a cage, to be stared at by all the people. He told also that no sooner had he performed this act of mercy than he was rewarded for it. He talked and talked, and the astonishment of his hearers grew greater and greater. But when he came to the royal lackey and the beautiful book, all the dairymaids dropped their needlework and sat staring at Clement in open-eyed wonder at his marvelous experiences. As soon as Clement had finished, the eldest of the dairymaids announced that he should have the muffler. Bernhard related only things that happened to another, but Clement has himself been the hero of a true story, which I consider far more important. In this all concurred. They regarded Clement with very different eyes after hearing that he had talked with the king, and the little fiddler was afraid to show how proud he felt. But at the very height of his elation, someone asked him what had become of the midget. "I had no time to set out the blue bowl for him myself," said Clement, "so I asked the old Laplander to do it. What has become of him since then, I don't know." No sooner had he spoken than a little pine cone came along and struck him on the nose. It did not drop from a tree, and none of the peasants had thrown it. It was simply impossible to tell whence it had come. "Ha ha, Clement," winked the dairymaid. "It appears as if the tiny folk were listening to us. You should not have left it to another to set out that blue bowl."